I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Bryce. I hope you're enjoying this festive season.
I sure am. Yes, it's hard not to. It's beautiful outside, great time of the year. And one of the best parts about this time of the year is kind of reflecting back on the year that has passed. And for us, really, on Overdue Finds, this kind of leads us to like one of my personal favorite episodes of the year. I think it is for you too, Caroline.
Absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely. I love having this kind of moment to pause and think about the year that was before we jet off into the future.
That's right. And I was thinking about it actually on my way home today, and how we started off 2022 with our 100th episode. And this is our 125th episode. So we're wrapping up the year on a nice kind of even note here.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool.
It has been 26 wonderful episodes this year. Yeah. More.
Yeah.
Because we've had a few bonus ones too.
Yes, that's right. So lots of Overdue Finds. It's been fun. And big thanks to everybody who's listened to us this year. But as I mentioned, today we are sharing our picks and other EPL staff members' picks for our favorite items in 2022. So we're going to be talking today about our favorite movies, books, TV shows, music, and games. And to kind of help us go through what we consider to be the best items of the year, of course, just our opinion, is a couple of amazing guests, and we're lucky to have back. First, I want to welcome back to the show. He's a library assistant here at EPL and has his own podcast that he hosts with his partner called I Love This, You Should Too. He was last on our Kids in the Hall episode. Indy Randhawa, welcome back to the show. How's it going today?
Thank you. Pretty good. I think it's fun that you chose me, someone who famously doesn't really consume any media past 1977, but I did my homework. I'm very happy to be here.
Nice. Yeah, it was funny. We joked around about this on our last episode where we talked about the Muppet Christmas Carol, and you were like one of a plethora of people, staff members, to kind of reach out and be like, yeah, I want to be on this episode. And we were like, oh, we have too many people. But I was like,
everybody loves Muppets Christmas Carol.
It's really hard not to, but
that is not true. I want to jump in because I had a rousing debate with a staff member of mine, one I supervise and who I'm now considering booting from the organization because he told me he does not like Muppets Christmas Carol and refused to show it as part of our film lineup at Milner. So I was gobsmacked.
Wow.
Nancy, I was ready for the revelation that it was going to be you that did not care for it. And
how little you think of me. No, I am a Muppet Christmas Carol lover.
I was ready for like this like breaking news on the podcast. But no, it is pretty
I'm not
great.
a monster.
Yeah.
Well, as you can hear, of course, it wouldn't be a best of the year episode without Nancy Sheng. She's an associate manager at our Stanley A. Milner Library and is actually back for a 5th year in a row in our best of episode. So Nancy, welcome back. And you totally almost threw us all off track there. And I totally thought you were kind of going to go with I do not care for the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Never. Being in management means I have the power to reprimand staff for not enjoying Muppets Christmas Carol because that is what responsible use of power is. But thanks for having me back. In the 5 years since I've been here, I found my first gray hair yesterday. So that is more gray hair than I had when I first started 5 years ago. It was very tragic.
Who knew way back in 2018 that this would become a yearly tradition for you? Well, today's going to be a fun episode. As I mentioned, this is absolutely my favorite episode of the year. And unlike most episodes of Overdue Finds, we're actually going to skip that because we're going to skip that pick because today really is a giant one big Overdue Finds segment. So with us, of course, being a library, it only makes sense. We're going to jump right into books. Indy, I'm going to start with you here today. What were some of your favorite titles that came out this past year?
Well, I think I might have to use my first cheat already, because currently I'm 14 books into my John Steinbeck deep dive, so I don't read a lot of new stuff, but the only new things I do read are from our YRCA list, the Young Reader's Choice Awards. And from the 22 list, they are books that came out in 2020, but you can currently read them and vote for them if you're voting for the YRCA. And my favorite of those so far has been Everything Sad is Untrue by Daniel Nayeri. So this is a true memoir of Nayeri's childhood, and it's a story of him growing up in Iran, coming or leaving as a refugee, settling in Oklahoma, and adjusting to his life there. So the story concentrates on his American life for the most part, but he often tells his classmates about stories about Iran, and so we get a bit of a back and forth that way. And it's pretty heartbreaking at points, but it's just such an honest memoir, something that we don't always see in things that are targeted at a younger audience. And he does such a great job at capturing the most specific emotions, and that's something that I always grasp onto in good writers. Because he introduces concepts that could be new to someone like me, like encapsulating the challenges faced by refugees, but he also managed to remind me of things that I had forgotten about my own childhood, because him, like myself, was someone who is growing up in a place where nobody looks like you. And he touched base on a lot of things that I forgot were painfully true. So that's my recommendation for a book from not quite 2022, but from 2020.
Close enough. Yeah, it's funny, actually. Lately, it seems like on the show, a lot of kind of some of our Overdue Finds picks have been some of those titles from YRCA. So I think kind of maybe my New Year's resolution might be to actually read some of those books on the list, because, I mean, even though obviously these are books that are kind of recommended by school-age kids, a lot of the themes are, adults can obviously really love these books too, so that's great to hear.
Yeah, definitely. Like, good writing is good writing regardless of the age, and I tend to read all of the YRCAs every year because I used to be on the team, and then once I started reading them for that, I just realized there's some really good books in there, so I keep up on those ones.
Nancy, how about you? You always have some great book recommendations.
Thank you. I am going to recommend Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. It's about Lee, who works for this mysterious underwater research conglomerate, but during one particular submarine mission goes missing. Eventually, she is found, she returns, but she comes back kind of wrong, ? Meanwhile, her wife Miri has to take care of her and put the pieces of their lives back together. It's like really weird and spooky and haunting. You learn a lot about deep sea diving, and it hurts in all the right places. Like, the writing is, to die for. So that's Our Wives Under the Sea.
I don't think I read enough about submarines.
Neither do I, and that's something I hope to correct in 2023.
Yeah, there's always great tales on submarines, it seems like.
So this submarine goes to the bottom of the ocean, and we don't really know much about what lurks there. So the fact that they come back wrong is, I don't want to say could be realistic, but it definitely kind of makes you feel chills.
Caroline, how about you? You've had some great book recommendations here over the year. Has there been one that maybe has already been an Overdue Find pick that you're like, this is my pick for best of the year?
I have held off talking about it because I knew I was going to save it for this episode, and my pick is It Was Vulgar and It Was Beautiful: How AIDS Activists Used Art to Fight a Pandemic by Jack Lowry. And this is the story of Grand Fury, which was an art collective that grew out of ACT UP, the AIDS rights coalition in the 1980s. Grand Fury and ACT UP were responsible for some of the most prolific images that are associated with that time, like the message of silence equals death, or the bloody handprint. They had another campaign around breaking down stereotypes about AIDS, as well as ones that really called out institutions like the New York Times, or financial institutions, or President Ronald Reagan, and for their actions or inactions around what was going on. Some of it was physical art, some of it was like mob group interactive art. It was just a really interesting look at those early days of the AIDS crisis and how people were responding to it. And every time they would talk about it being a pandemic, thinking about how people were responding over the last few years to COVID as well, around the ways that society is different or the same, around our impulse to create messages through art. I find stories of the AIDS crisis to be very, very interesting from so many different perspectives. And this was one that, yes, it's 400 pages, but it's worth it to really dig into this history. And some of those pages do have images, photographs, pictures, showing off the art works that they did. So it was vulgar and it was beautiful by Jack Lowry.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I mean, as a kind of growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, like everything, a lot of stuff like you would hear about like AIDS in the news and school and everything else. Like I remember coming home from school, I think it was in grade 7, and when Magic Johnson announced that he was, effectively retiring from the NBA because he was HIV positive, and just, during that time, it was almost seemed like it was kind of like a death sentence for Magic Johnson. And it was, just, it was kind of, that's how it was back then, but that sounds like it would be a really great book to read.
I loved it. I learned a lot. It just kind of spun me off in other directions, which I always love when nonfiction does that. I also had some, I don't want to call them runner-ups, but other books I wanted to mention on here. One of them I might mention or talk about on a future episode, and that is Ducks by Kate Beaton. And that is, she is a Canadian cartoonist who wrote about her 2 years working in the oil fields here in Alberta and what that was like. And I was just blown away. This book stuck with me after reading it. And so highly, highly recommend that. And then 2 books that I have talked about on the podcast before. One is Mina by Matthew Forsyth, a picture book about a tiny little mouse whose father brings home a pet squirrel, but it's not actually a squirrel, it's a cat, but no one believes her. Beautiful, beautiful illustrations. And the last one, I talked about it last time on the podcast, Book Lovers by Emily Henry. If you love romance novels with bookish people, go check out Book Lovers by Emily Henry.
I was doing some Christmas shopping and walked into a Indigo Chapters, and like there was like a ton of copies of Book Lovers. Like it seems like that's like the gift to be getting everybody, I think, this year.
I think there'll be a lot of happy people on Christmas morning for sure.
Yeah. I was going to say too, I also have a hold on Ducks because I'd heard from yourself and a couple of other of our colleagues here at EPL that's an amazing book. So and actually I'll promote it right now, but we'll have a link to it on our show notes. We, of course, do have, there's also a blog that we put out here in addition to our picks here on today's episode, where it's past guests of Overdue Finds, and they're sharing some of their favorite titles. And I do know that Dux is on that blog as well.
Yeah. So, Bryce, what book do you want to share from this last year?
Yeah, so like you, I also have nonfiction, and this is also a book that I say I was going to talk about, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to save it for our best of the year episode, because I think this is my favorite book of the year. So unlike previous years, I was actually able to get through a decent amount of like new books that came out in 2022, but the one title that really stood out for me, it's called Rogues: True Stories of Grifters, Killers, Rebels, and Crooks by Patrick Radden Keefe. So Keefe is actually an award-winning investigative journalist from the New Yorker, and this book is a collection of some of his best stories from that publication. So hopefully I'm not cheating. This is kind of like a soundtrack type pick. This is like a collection of different writing and essays by him. But I actually listened to the audiobook version of this, and it was read by Keefe himself. So first of all, I was kind of a little skeptical, but Keefe actually did a great job on the audiobook version of this one, really just by conveying the suspense and danger of some of these stories. One of my favorites, it's actually the very first story in the book. It's about the world of counterfeit wine. So I had no idea that this was a big thing, but kind of the first story in the book goes over basically this guy who's kind of set up this scheme that he's apparently found all these old wine bottles that belong to Thomas Jefferson. So he's selling these wine bottles for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and of course, you know, spoiler alert, they are not real. They are total frauds. So, and then basically his work does go into, looks at kind of this world of counterfeit wine. So I had no idea that was a real thing, but there's also some other great stories too, including a story about a man who's trying to find justice for his brother that was killed in an aircraft bombing in the early 80s over in Europe. So yeah, this is one where if you're a nonfiction fan, you're absolutely going to love it. I know we do have some true crime fans of who listen to the podcast as well. So this is one that'll kind of I think this is one that everybody will love, even if you're not a big true crime fan. These stories, and like I said, especially the one about the counterfeit wine, really hooked me in right away. So this is a good one.
This is really tough because I kind of want to pause right now and just go read all these books. This is the problem with this episode.
Oh, definitely. I know. I always have a list of stuff that I end up wanting to get. Actually, a couple of years ago, one of Nancy's picks, I ended up buying for Cheryl for Christmas.
Was it the cat eyeball one?
Yes, that was the one. Yeah. She loved the book, by the way.
So moving from books to music, what was your favorite song or album that was released this last year? Nancy, I'll start with you.
You know what? I am not very original, because I will say it was Taylor Swift's Midnights. I think I'm just going to come out and admit it. I am a closet Swiftie, and so nothing is going to top that. You know, everything that's been said about the album has been said by people who are better than me, so I won't regurgitate it. But yeah, love me some Taylor Swift.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question that is going to expose myself as someone who is not that familiar with both this album or Swiftian culture, but do you have a favorite song from the album? And is that a terrible, inappropriate question to ask for some reason?
You know what? I do. Maybe that means I'm not as devoted a Swiftie as I could be, but it's Vigilante. Vigilante, blank swear word that I don't think I should repeat online. But yes, Vigilante, that's my favorite one.
I don't know. I maybe thought it's no, Caroline, it's a concept that you can't splinter off. This idea of favorites but I like that you had an answer.
I'm just very decisive. What can I say?
Love it. Love it so much. Indy, how about you?
Well, initially, my pick was going to be No Fear of Time, the new record by Black Star, which is Mos Def and Talib Kweli. It's their first album in a very long time, but for whatever reason, they decided to release that on a subscription-based service. So most people just aren't going to hear it. So luckily, a band called Hermanos Gutierrez came out with an album called El Bueno y El Malo. And it came out this last October, and they are a two-piece band. They are brothers, Alejandro and Esteban, and their instrumentation is deceptively simple. They are always just doing one classic guitar, one lap steel, percussions, and no vocals at all. And they take their influence a lot from Ecuadorian music of the 40s and 50s, but then also like spaghetti Western soundtracks from the 50s and 60s. So the title of the album translates to The Good and the Bad, which I assume is a reference to the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because it seems very reminiscent of the works of Ennio Morricone, who scored like all of the best spaghetti westerns. And if you're not familiar with any of those influences and you want to know what type of music this is, I think this is the type of music that should be the next theme song for a haunting HBO show, or played over a scene where someone is like solemnly burying a body in the desert at night next to a bonfire. This is the score for a scene like that.
Nice. I haven't heard that album, but as soon as you kind of mentioned, you know, especially with like the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly score and kind of the influence from the spaghetti westerns of the 60s and stuff I totally had some music playing in my head. So that sounds really cool.
It's a lot of fun. It's atmospheric, I think, is a very good way to describe it.
Bryce, how about you?
As we all know, I've talked about a lot on the show, similar to Indy. With my music, I'm like, hey, this was produced after 1978. I really don't have much interest in it. But and this is actually a band that I have mentioned on the show before.
ABBA. Is it ABBA?
No, it is not ABBA. Oh. No, that ABBA album is not my favorite of the year. But it's actually the Canadian rock band The Beaches. They released another album this year called Sisters Not Twins, the Professional Lovers album. And this is actually a combination of two EPs that were released separately a couple of years ago. And this album actually won Best Rock Album at this year's Juno Awards. So maybe The Beaches will be coming here in March for this year's Juno Awards. So that would be pretty awesome. So I love their pop/rock sound, and their new single called Grow Up Tomorrow is amazing. I've had it stuck in my head since I heard it for the first time a couple months ago, and it's really fun. And to me, I'm going to say it right now, I think Grow Up Tomorrow deserves to be Canada's new rock anthem. It should be way more popular than it is. So I'm going to throw that out there right now. But you know what? As somebody who's a classic rock fan, obviously this isn't, the Beaches aren't Led Zeppelin, nor are they trying to be, but I think they're, you know, this group of this all-female band from Toronto. They're killing it right now, and I absolutely love their music. And their album, Sisters Not Twins, the Professional Lovers album, you can borrow from us, and yeah, it's my favorite of the year.
Cool. I think, we should take that up as maybe our official Overdue Finds campaign is to raise the profile for Canada's new rock anthem on there. Mine, I think these were my picks at mid-year, and I just am gonna hold on to them. Lizzo released a new album this year, and I think she had a pretty great year. You know, my favorite part was probably when she got to play the Library of Congress's holding of it was Thomas Jefferson's flute, I think so, his crystal glass flute. Who knew Thomas Jefferson would be coming up so much on this episode? But yeah. I mean, I think she has just had a fantastic year. I love seeing her in the profiles and the music and the videos. Yeah, more Lizzo. I'm always happy to see it. And then my other choice on that was As It Was by Harry Styles. I didn't know it was by Harry Styles until well after it had kind of peaked. I don't know what people were using it for in social media, but as far as like TikTok and stuff, I know less about it now than I probably did about at the beginning of the year, but it had a kind of cool retro sound that once I did realize that the song where I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, every time was the same song. It was fun to listen to. So yeah, I always hope that I'll come across something new, and maybe next year I'll have to redevote myself to this, partly because I like seeing everyone's year-end stuff. I know there's like stigma about this online with like, oh, nobody wants to see your year-end lists of what your most popular, most listened
Spotify
to
list, yeah.
I totally want to hear all that from everyone. I'm very interested in it,
too.
actually.
Right? Like a chance to like peek into somebody's like private head. Like I want to see it, but mine is not like, even I think mine is like, you listen to like 20 minutes of music this year. So maybe I think maybe that could be a resolution for me for 2023. 1 year from today at our recording, I will have something to talk about.
You know what, though? As someone who, I'm going to say, not so recently went through a hardcore One Direction fan phase, I think you should listen to more Harry Styles next year.
I don't not want to listen to Harry Styles. It's more just like, I know it from being vaguely online, and then I'm like, oh, that sounds good. But like, I don't know, maybe I'm buying into this thing around like, if I was a real fan, I'd be able to name a second Harry Styles song. So yeah, I think I just want to do more with it. It's not that I don't stand by my choices of Lizzo and Harry Styles. It's that I think I should listen more to them and others.
Maybe that should be our resolutions, to like what we like to the extent that we like. You don't have to be hardcore about everything. I only recently discovered I think I like The Weeknd. I listen to all this old stuff, but then I keep hearing this music. I was like, oh, what's this like 80s synthy stuff? And people are like, oh, that's kind of one of the biggest bands ever. And I was like, oh, okay, it's pretty slick. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't always have to be on the top of kind of what's hot in music, and I know we joke around about that a lot on the show with Caroline and myself, because yeah, I mean, definitely my music taste tends to be older, but yeah, just enjoy what you like, and yeah, you definitely don't have to be super hardcore about it. But I was gonna say though, Caroline, my favorite thing this year with Harry Styles was, did he spit on Chris Pine at the Cannes Film Festival? That had the internet up in a roar. 100%.
I mean, we could have a whole category on just what was your favorite moment of that press weekend for Don't Worry, Darling.
Which, by the way, it was actually a pretty good movie. I liked it, and it's too bad that all that media stuff kind of overshadowed it, because I thought it was a good movie. All right, so moving on. Oh, I love this category. So, which game did everybody enjoy most this year? Caroline?
Yeah.
What level are you at on Best Fiends? And have you tried a new mobile game this year?
I downloaded one, but I can't even remember what it was because I haven't started it yet. But that is because I am on level 4,308 of Best Fiends. So yeah, so in terms of owning what you love and to the extent that you love it, that's how much I love Best Fiends.
Nothing wrong with that. You're obviously crushing it on that game.
Yeah.
I had no idea the levels just keep going up.
I think they do. And I don't know when it stops. So I guess we'll see on that. But yeah, again, coming back from my answer at our mid-year episode when we did our kind of check-in halfway through a game this year, mine's Wordle. I'm still playing. I don't know how many people are, but I love it. And I have to say, today's I got in 2 and I felt so powerful. It was the best feeling.
I have to ask because you won't be spoiling it because this episode is out on December 30th. What was the word today? I
don't even want to put it out there. I know that I know that it's not coming out today, but this is how seriously I take Wordle culture.
You have to respect the Wordle bond, Bryce. Like you can't break it.
Yeah. So that's me and games, but I'm can't wait to hear from people who've played actual character games this year.
Nancy, how about you? Like you've had some great picks here in the past. What games really caught your interest this year?
So my favorite game that's in our collection is 13 Sentinels: Aegis Rim. So it follows a group of Japanese teenagers in the 1980s who have to, you guessed it, fight kaiju. It's really interesting to me because as a game, it doesn't stick to one format. It's like part visual novel, which is probably my favorite game genre. It's part real-time combat, it's part side-scroller, and it mixes influences. So, I'm pulling this from a review I read. Quote, it's like if you remixed E.T., Godzilla, The Terminator, The Matrix, and War of the Worlds. So, I found, Japanese sci-fi games can be very, very high concept, and this is one of them. And I love that. So, if you're like me and sometimes you just want to play, an old-school JRPG, this isn't that. It's even better.
Nice. Which system is that on?
I played it on Switch.
Indy, how about you? We haven't talked. Are you much of a gamer at all?
I am not, so I don't think I have a good answer for you. This year, though, I did finish a video game for the first time in probably 10 years. It's not a new game, but I played Ghost of Tsushima, which is a 2-year-old game now, but if I were going to let that scale slide further, I can recommend that one. It's a great game if you like both period-accurate costumes to 13th century Japan, if you like decapitations, but you also like to write haikus. And that's what I think made this game appeal to me. I'm not a big gamer. I don't like investing a lot of time, but the scenery of this was beautiful, and then you have activities where it says, sit by this waterfall and reflect on the impermanence of life. And then I'm thinking, well, that's just what I do in my day-to-day anyway, so now I can do it in a video game. So that is my not-so-new pick.
Indy, I will say, in the Venn diagram of people who like decapitations and haikus, I'm not quite sure how big that middle area is, but...
Oh, but for those people, that neglected little part of the middle of that Venn diagram, this is for them. For us.
Yeah. Is there a better feeling than finishing a video game, though? You complete it, and then the credits roll. Sometimes you're a little up, so I think about Red Dead Redemption. When I finished that game, I was a little sad because I was like, this was so fun, and I'm kind of sad it's all over, but it's still it's a good feeling. It's kind of like, finishing a great book.
For this one, I was very sad, but because of the subject, it was there are different endings, of course. I'm not going to spoil anything, but the way it played out for me was incredibly sad. The writing in this game was fantastic, and it is being turned into a film, which should be out in the next couple of years.
Okay, but they better not have Tom Cruise star as, the white guy who saves Japan.
Let me tell you something. Okay. All Japanese cast in Japanese.
Nice.
Yeah. So far, that might change.
Well, I'm going to look forward to all the decapitations and haikus and reflecting in front of waterfalls. It's going to be a great movie. You can feed cats.
You pet cats and feed them. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Okay, I am going to jump in and say we have moved beyond that as a video game industry. I haven't played it yet, but I know topping many people's best game of the year is Stray, where you not just pet cats, you are a cat. So, like, be the cat.
I have it on hold right now.
Are you like a human cat or like a cat? Like, do you live a life like where you have to, I don't know, go out and do things?
I believe you're a cat in a cyberpunk environment.
Yeah.
As far as I know, there's no secret human puppeting the cat. You're just a cat.
I think you have a kind of a robotic backpack that allows you to do some extra things, but you're a straight-up cat.
Whoa.
And I'm very excited to play it.
I have not heard of that game before, but and I'm more of a dog person, but that sounds really fun. I have to check that one out. For me, though, this year, this is a game actually I did mention. I kind of went on a little bit of a tirade about this game during our Best of the Year So Far episode. And I was kind of upset because at the time, it was only available as a digital download. There was no physical copies of it, but now they finally released it. You can borrow it from us. And that for me was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Revenge of Shredder. So I've talked about this before. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and for me, huge fan of the Ninja Turtles as a kid. So this side-scrolling beat-em-up game brought me back to my days as a kid with its retro arcade pixel graphics and even better, callbacks to the original 1987 cartoon series. Fans of the show, do you remember Vernon, who worked at the TV station, who was kind of a jerk to April O'Neil? He's in this game. You can't control him, but he's in the game. So it's little details like that I absolutely love. So, of course, not only can you play as your favorite Ninja Turtle, mine is Leonardo, by the way, you can also play as Splinter, April O'Neil. She's wielding a microphone so you can hit bad guys with it, and my personal favorite, Casey Jones. And the one thing I really love about this game too is it has an online co-op mode, so you can play with up to 5 different players at once. So there's 6 of you on the screen fighting Shredder and all these iconic Ninja Turtle villains. So Revenge of Shredder, that's my game of the year. And close second, and I think I've mentioned this the last couple of years, is the new Call of Duty game, Call of Duty 2 Modern Warfare 2. For me, I'm a huge sucker for the new DMZ mode, which you team up with a couple of your friends online and you go battle some bots in Al Mazrah. So that for me, those two for me are my favorite games of the year.
The Ninja Turtle one sounds very awesome. As you were describing it, I had to remind myself that it was not actually a reissue of an old game, but it's a new game in the style, in the manner of that's
just it. Yeah, it's a brand new game, but it has that retro kind of 90s look. Everybody's the graphics are really fun and sharp, but it's everybody's a little bit pixelated and everything like that. So now there was a second Ninja Turtles game that was released this year called the Cowabunga Collection. That one's also fun too, but it is a reissue of kind of the original Nintendo game, which I absolutely hate because it's impossible.
Because it's too hard, or you don't
it's too hard.
the storytelling of it.
The storytelling is I remember as a kid being this kind of sucks, but I wasn't a big fan of it. But so they released that one on there, and there's a Sega Genesis version and a Game Boy version. There's 10 or 12 original Ninja Turtles games from the 80s and 90s on it. So the Cowabunga Collection is fun, but Shredder's Revenge that's my favorite one this year.
Interesting. Not likely that we will have the Ninja Turtles topping people's answers for this next category. Movies and TV. What was your favorite movie or TV series from this last year? Indy, I'll start with you.
All right. Well, feel free to cut me off whenever, because if I'm left to my own devices, I'll talk for many hours, because I watched RRR, this Indian film from 2022. It's a 3-hour epic, and I don't even know where to start talking about this movie. If you're not familiar with Indian cinema, I can try to put it in like Hollywood terms. So it has more over-the-top action than the last 5 Fast and the Furious movies. It has better songs and dances than Chicago. It has the history aspect of Braveheart, better fight sequences than Infinity War, a more fun friend dynamic than Lethal Weapon, the twists of The Departed, and the religious allegories of Superman. And it's all in one masterpiece. And I won't spoil anything, of course, but I don't think you can spoil anything, like only in the way that you could spoil a roller coaster. Like, how do you spoil it? You must experience it. So, for instance, there's this one fight sequence where one man fights like 600 people with a stick and his bare hands. And it's somewhere between a superhero movie where he's stronger than everyone, but it's blended with an amazing amount of like visceral realism, like those movies like Ong Bak or Ninja Assassin, where you can feel every punch. And I think it's maybe the best action sequence I've seen in 10 years. The only thing that might beat it happens at about the 2-hour mark of the same movie. Somebody uses a tiger as a weapon, just throw in a tiger. Someone's sword fighting with a motorcycle, and there's dance battles. And the first time someone starts dancing, it comes out of nowhere, and it's a little jarring if you're not familiar with that style of cinema. But then the dance is so good that you quickly buy in, and then by the time it's over, you just want more. And luckily, there are more. It has like such sincerity. There's no detached irony like Marvel's quippiness. There's it's so sincere but not serious. It's still light and fun. It's kind of like a postmodern musical, because in musicals people sing their emotions and we just accept that. But here they not only sing their emotions, they dance their emotions, they fight their emotions, they have soliloquies, the setting changes around them, and you just completely buy into all of it. So it's a spectacle, I guess, is the best way to put it. Unfortunately, there's no physical disc or release for it yet. It is available on Netflix, and of course, once it is available on some sort of physical media, I will personally request it and make sure we have it at EPL. So if you want something to tide you over until then, the same director has 2 movies called Bahubali: The Beginning and Bahubali 2: The Conclusion, which gives you a taste of it, and we have both of those at EPL, but it's just kind of preparing you for the insanity and miraculous nature that is RRR.
Indy, I love RRR. I will second everything you say. I basically got up and started dancing like in the middle of the dance scene.
As you should.
And they do that in Indian cinemas. Like, I went and watched clips of people dancing in front of the dance scene is how devoted I was.
It's something you need to experience. It's not like, there's a lot of movies I love. I love film and I love studying it and all of that, but it's an experience is the best way to say it. It makes me want to watch more movies. It makes me want to give those big summer blockbusters a second chance, because that I always think that, oh, they're too big, that's not fun. It makes me want to watch those. It makes me want to watch old 50s musicals. It makes me want to study Indian cinema. It reminds me of what I love about the spectacular nature of cinema.
Yeah, there's a real joy to it, a joyfulness that you don't often see with a lot of other movies these days. Yeah,
that's interesting. I've never, I can honestly say I've never watched, like, I guess something from Indian cinema. It's funny because, like, I love movie posters, like movie poster art, and they always seem to have like the coolest movie posters. Like, everything just looks so like epic and everything, and it's like everything kind of almost looks like Gone with the Wind. Like, there's these big sweeping images and everything. So, but yeah, that RRR sounds pretty awesome, actually, and I think I might have to like dip my toe in with maybe that one. But yeah, it almost kind of sounds like what you said, Indy, kind of comparing it to the Fast and the Furious movies. It almost kind of seems like Fast and the Furious would take a look at it and be like, whoa, that's a lot that's happening right now.
And I know that 3-hour runtime is daunting. When I first decided to watch it, it was at like midnight, and I thought, I'll watch 20 minutes today. I'll just watch it episodically throughout the week. And in the first 20 minutes, it's like, well, I'm staying up until 3:30 because there's no way I'm not going to finish this. It's very captivating.
Indy, I believe that RRR was talked about on your podcast, right?
Briefly, yeah. We haven't done a full episode on it yet, but that will be coming probably maybe soon after this releases, actually.
But maybe that's a future Overdue Finds episode. Bollywood, Indian movies. Not that Bollywood equals all Indian movies because it's only a small segment, but
yeah.
Indian
this
cinema.
One is Tollywood.
Tollywood, exactly.
Also, I just want to say, how do you spoil a roller coaster? Blew my mind. I wrote it down. It's in my notes. I'm going to think about this. Wow.
You can tell someone, oh, it's a big drop, but telling someone doesn't prepare you.
Yeah, Nancy. What did you have a movie or TV series?
My favorite movie this year, and it's shown up on everyone's best of list, but it's Everything Everywhere All at Once. Trippy, mind-blowing, multiverse, in a year where several multiverse movies came out. It was the best of them all. It's about the immigrant experience. It's about the American experience. It's about troubled mother-daughter relationships. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening to this, you'll know why that really appeals to me. It has Michelle Yeoh just kicking butt left, right, and center, has gorgeous costumes. It made me laugh out loud. It made me cry. It's breathtaking. Yeah, highly recommend it.
Yeah, that movie's come up a couple times on the show just from previous guests have mentioned it and everything. And and I've mentioned before, it's easily the most original movie of the year. Like, it's something I remember seeing the first trailer for it and I was like, what is this? This looks awesome. And like, it looks like a comic book movie, but I know it's not. And yeah, like I said, it definitely blew my mind, and I'm still thinking about it.
I really enjoyed it as well. It might be my second favorite movie of the year. And I am one of the people that actually liked Daniel's other movie, the Swiss Army Man, which I think a lot of people hated. I really enjoyed it. And I like what they did.
Where Daniel Radcliffe's genitalia is like a compass?
That's in there, yep.
Okay.
And there's a lot of farting in it too, but it's also a very sad, heartbreaking movie. But like this one, they blend the ridiculous with the mundane and the heartbreaking all together, and it comes out in this kind of glorious mishmash at the end.
Yeah, and one of the small things that kind of signaled to me very early on that, I'm really going to like this movie is they have the family like switch between English and Chinese like pretty effortlessly, the way actual bilingual families do. And that kind of was like, we're not just pandering to the audience by having them inexplicably always speaking English, because in reality families like that, they switch all the time.
And the man playing opposite Michelle Yeoh, whose name I forget now, but I hadn't seen him since he was Short Round.
Yeah, it's funny because like when I was watching that movie, I was like, man, like that actor, he looks familiar, kind of the voice sounds familiar. And yeah, then when I get home, I'm kind of looking on IMDb about him. And I was like, okay, I'm going through the actors list, and Ki-Hugh Kwan, I believe. I probably didn't pronounce that right, but yeah, thank you. And of course, like from Goonies and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And yeah, I had no idea that he wasn't really acting for all these years. And that was really cool. He did an amazing job in the movie.
He was so good. Have you seen that image of him reuniting with Harrison Ford and they're hugging each other?
Yes.
It's like, I'm trying to scratch my mind. Is that the only time I've seen Harrison Ford like smile recently? Maybe.
Probably.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet. But yeah, it's such a wholesome image anyway.
And I think with all the insanity that is in that movie, the strongest part is those three performances that are somehow grounded in reality despite all of the stuff that's going on around them.
Bryce, how about you? What's come to the top from your movie experience?
During our best of the year so far, I mentioned my favorite movie was The Northman. And throughout the course of the year, I've been trying to find another movie to top it, and I haven't. So I'm going to sing The Northman's praises again. I love that movie. As I mentioned during that previous episode, if you're a fan of movies like these big epic battle scenes like in Gladiator or Braveheart, you're going to love this one. So if you're not familiar with the movie, Alexander Skarsgård stars as a prince, and he's forced to go into hiding as a young boy when his father is murdered. The film follows him as he slowly looks for the man who's responsible for his death and to rescue his mother from that same man. I love this movie. Had some of my favorite action scenes in it this year, and Everything Everywhere All at Once probably was maybe number 2 on that action list, but the Northman's battle scenes were really awesome. And this movie is filmed in Iceland as well, so it's some really cool outdoor visuals with like the Vikings and everything. So that's a movie you can borrow right now from us. And that's my favorite movie of the year. And I do also want to give another shout out too for as far as TV series goes. Better Call Saul wrapped up perfectly. So it's not quite in our collection yet, but I read that it will be on DVD here in December. So we probably have it on order then. And as I mentioned before, this is also, in my opinion, probably the best spin-off series of all time. It's really hard, I think, when you have a show like Breaking Bad and you're trying to, one of the most celebrated TV series of all time, to really spin that off effectively. And Vince Gilligan and the director and the other producers here did a great job with it. This final season featured so many uncomfortable laughs. There's callbacks to Breaking Bad, which as a fan I loved, suspense, and in one case I actually gasped out loud as we saw the fate of one of the main characters. It was a great way to wrap up the show. And I do want to say, because we're in kind of the awards season right now, and I think it's a crime that actress Rhea Seehorn didn't get nominated for a Golden Globe for her portrayal as Saul Goodman's wife, Kim Wexler. There's a scene where she's kind of leaving on an airport shuttle, and it's one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've ever seen before. So great series. I was kind of sad to see it end here earlier this summer, but now that it's out on DVD, you can go relive the whole series again. Caroline, how about you? What have you enjoyed this year?
This was the first year, and we've talked about this in a number of other best ofs from previous years, but this was the first year I really ran into a bunch of my favorites ending up being proprietary streaming releases, so not available through our catalog, but one that I do believe we will be getting sometime soon in the near future is Barbarian. And I have to say, this is like it's easy to talk about on the podcast because I'm just not going to talk about it on the podcast, because the less you know about this movie, the better. And so the log line that I was given was a young woman shows up at the Airbnb she's rented and discovers that someone else is already there. So that's all you need to know going into it. Go watch it, then come back and email me, podcast@epl.ca, because there are just so many things about this movie, aspects of everything from the script to the casting to the pacing to the overall story that I just want to talk about. But you can't talk about it until you've seen it. I explained it to someone that I started the movie at home, watching it at home, and I was on my phone, probably playing Best Fiends at the same time. And over the course of the movie, the phone, like, I ended up down on the couch. The movie had my full attention. I was just like, didn't know what was going on. And it's been a really long time since I've seen a movie and had no idea what was going to happen next. And that experience of it just drawing me in is probably what has like put it that high on my list for this year.
It's such a good movie.
I keep track of the movies I've seen over the course of the year on this website called Letterboxd. And so when I see like a new movie, I'll just kind of rank it. And like Barbarian is in my top 5 this year. And yeah, that's one where, like you said, the description of a woman shows up at like an Airbnb and there's another man there. And that's what you see in the trailer. And you see maybe, you know, some kind of creepy images, but obviously they don't share a lot about the movie. And that's so, like you said, you can't really talk about it because you have to experience it. And what you think you're watching is just something totally different. Like yeah, that was one where I remember I saw that one in the theater. I saw it on like opening weekend because I'd read a few things where it was like,
go see it. The less you know, the better.
Yeah, don't talk too much about it to other people, basically.
Like an anti-word of mouth campaign.
Yeah, exactly. And so I go see it, and I'm just like, I go to a lot of horror movies, and I'm a sucker for them, and so I'm just kind of like desensitized to it all, and I like go in there thinking like, oh, you know, this will just be another horror movie. I'm sure they're kind of blowing it out of proportion. And like I left that theater with like my jaw on the floor. Like I was just like, wow, like I immediately want to watch this again. So yeah, great movie. Love it.
Yeah, I was definitely, like I said, I started out kind of like, oh, I'll put a movie on and then also tool around on my phone. And it, like, next thing I know, phone is down, full attention, like watching it, yelling at the characters, at the movie, at everything. Oh, I want to talk about it so badly, but know that this isn't the place to do it. My other pick from TV was one that I've talked about on the show in the past. Now EPL does have it on order, so you can put a hold on it and wait for it to come in. And that is The Staircase, the limited series starring Colin Firth and Toni Collette, about the real-life story of Michael Peterson, who was accused of murdering his wife Kathleen in the States in December of 2001. The acting in this is amazing. The story was one that I was quite familiar with from the documentary, which EPL also has. It raises such questions about, you know, storytelling and truth and justice and who owns a story and who owns someone's life story and all kinds of really interesting questions on there. But again, the acting is just tremendous. The whole, I think, production crew did a really good job with it. So The Staircase, which aired earlier this year, now can be placed on hold at EPL.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was one I remember we talked about on the show before, and I'd seen the like original documentary. I haven't watched the HBO one, but I'm totally going to put my name down for hold now because I do want to kind of experience that telling of it, I guess. All right, so let's get to our quick roundtable questions. Nancy, I'm going to start with you. What is one older title that you read or watched this year, or maybe listened to, that you've been meaning to enjoy for a while and you finally got a chance to read or watch it?
Yeah, so 2022 is my year of being obsessed with gothic novels and gothic horror novels. I read so many, but the one that I'm going to shout out is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. You know, with gothic novels, it's like, give me the haunted house, give me the mysterious, possibly incestuous family. But this take on the gothic formula takes place in Mexico, as the title suggests, just does it all so well. And the author has another Gothic e-novel out called The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which I'm also excited to read. So all hail the Gothic novel.
That's awesome. Indy, how about you? You said you've been kind of enjoy some of the older titles, so I'm sure there's lots for you to choose from for this question.
Definitely. I didn't have a hard time, or I guess I had a hard time picking something because there were too many options, but I went with that old Spotify most listened artist, and I was like, yeah, nobody ever talks about Amanaz, so I'm going to talk about them. Because I kind of discovered relatively recently that like 65 to 75 was my favorite time in music, because there's that funk and soul from the US, there's the rock in England, Japanese enka at that time was great. And then I got really into a subgenre called Zamrock, which is just rock music from Zambia. That's a blend of Zambian folk with some psychedelic rock, funk, and blues mixed in. And my favorite of those was a band called Amanaz and their album called Africa. And Amanaz isn't the most famous band to come out of this movement, but they're definitely my favorite because they're a little more eclectic. Their sound is a little more varied, and they're a little darker than the other ones as well. And plus, Amanaz is an acronym, and it stands for Ask Me About Nice Artists in Zambia, which I thought was hilarious, and I love that so much. So there's a good variety on this one album. Like some songs are relaxing beach tunes, like Sunday Morning, which sounds like it could be a Velvet Underground B-side. Their most famous one is probably Kala, My Friend, which kind of gives voice to the disenfranchised average Zambian citizen of the time. There's ones like History of Man, which is pretty heavy and kind of reminds me of 1969 era Stooges with those fuzzy riffs and noodly solos. And then they also have some, most of their music is in English, but they have some songs that are in the Nyanja language, like Kale, which is a Zambian folk blues song, and it talks about Zambia's journey from slavery up until now. Well, not now, I guess 1973. But it's very hard to find a physical copy because there were two pressings of it on vinyl in 73 and 75. But luckily, through the magic of library services, you can go to Hoopla and listen to it for free right now.
Wow.
I've never heard of that band before, but yeah, great description, and definitely want to check that out now. Sounds very funky, so.
They're a lot of fun, and it's a very accessible way in, I think. Because I think we have a kind of an idea of music from different countries is going to be so different that we can't get in. And I don't think it's getting influences from people like Eric Clapton. I think it's at the same time when everyone was discovering, like, we can record things by ourselves, we have these guitars and we can make our own music, and you see similar things popping up all around the world that have like these similar through lines through them.
Caroline, how about you? Which older title did you finally get around to discovering this year?
Pee-wee's Big Adventure was a movie I had never seen, and I watched it this year and feel good about that. It was very similar to the time that I watched Swingers, and hear me out. Watching it filled in a number of like linguistic holes for me of like, oh, that's where that came from, or that's why everyone was saying this phrase or this thing at that time period, which was very much my experience when I watched Swingers for the first time a couple years ago. But Pee-wee's Big Adventure I enjoyed a lot more than Swingers, and I think that it was just it was at the wrong time for me. Like I was just too young for Pee-wee's Playhouse, and then by the time I was kind of old enough, it was off the air, and things that were involving Paul Rubens weren't really being aired at that time. So it just kind of it fell into what was this cultural hole for me. But I have now seen and enjoyed Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Oh, I love to hear that. As a kid in that era, I remember I remember like the first time watching Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I was over at a friend's house and they had it recorded off Super Channel, and just thinking like it was like one of the best movies ever, and being so jealous of Pee-wee's house I thought was cool, with all the like that opening montage of him waking up and like him getting his cereal and his breakfast and everything. His bike was awesome, and love it. Love everything about that movie. So yeah.
What about you, Bryce? What did you watch this or read or listen to this year?
Yeah, for me, I love my 80s movies, but one movie that I've just never gotten around to watching until this year was 1988's Rain Man, starring Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. So I don't know how I missed this one. It won Best Picture in 1989, so I was definitely too young to watch this when it first came out. But won Best Picture. Dustin Hoffman won Best Actor for his portrayal as of Raymond Babbitt, and of course most people know his character in the movie is autistic. So it's funny, I kind of got mixed feelings about this movie. Like, it's definitely very dated as far as like the 80s go, just the music in it and everything. It doesn't quite hold up that well, and especially too with, and this of course would be controversial today with Dustin Hoffman playing a character who's autistic. And so yeah, I was really torn on this movie, and like I said, it doesn't quite hold up that great, but I mean, overall, like, it is a good movie, but this one I would kind of put on kind of in the category of, did it deserve to win Best Picture? Yeah. All right, so last question. I always love the answers on this one. Which release are you most looking forward to in 2023? Indy?
I'm going to go with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. The first one was probably my favorite comic book movie ever made. I loved Into the Spider-Verse so much. It's another one of those movies that is a spectacle, and it's really something to behold, to just sit and watch that movie and be mesmerized by it. And then if that's not enough, there's great characters and storytelling and like some fantastic thematic elements of it. We discussed it on the podcast that I co-host, and it was our longest episode ever because I couldn't just couldn't stop talking about how much I loved that movie. So I've read nothing about the new one. I won't see anything about it. A new trailer came out today. I'm not going to watch it, but I will go and watch this movie. I don't go to theaters much, and I don't think I've been in years, but I think what better way to get back into a theater than with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse?
Love the first one as well, and it's just watching a real life comic book like just come to life. It's the colors, everything. It's that one's pretty high on my list too. Nancy, how about you?
I am really looking forward to a new book by one of my favorite sci-fi authors, Anne Leckie. She has a new novel in her really popular Imperial Rot universe, and the book is called Translation State. If you have never read her books and you love sci-fi, you absolutely have to give them a chance. They're just so good. They're so smart. They deal with such interesting ideas. And I am very pumped that she has a new book out in that series.
Caroline, how about you?
I cheated a little.
Can I take a guess?
Sure.
I'm going to guess it's a movie that's technically come out already. Is it Glass Onion?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm most looking forward to in the period between when we record and when this episode comes out. So if we were doing that topic, that would be, I am cautiously excited about Glass Onion. No, but I had two. One is a TV series based on a book that I've talked about on the show, Daisy Jones and the Six. The miniseries will be coming out in March on Prime. It's going to have, from the pictures I've seen of the filming, it has a very Fleetwood Mac love triangle kind of feel to it, so I'm down for that. And then my second pick, coming out in April. Bryce, you know that thing where you and your partner have been together for so long and you're like the perfect couple, and then you break up, but you don't actually tell your friends because you don't know how to break it to them, but then you actually have to go to Maine because someone is like selling their beach house and they need you to have one great last summer there, and everyone thinks you're still together, so you have to share a room and there's only one bed and you're going to pretend to be the perfect couple even though you broke up, but you still kind of love each other. You know that thing?
Everybody's gone through that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is Happy Place by Emily Henry, author of Book Lovers, and that comes out in April.
Nice. Well, I look forward to you talking about that on future episode of Overdue Finds.
I can't wait.
Probably the second half of 2023.
Now, Bryce, for the last few years, I think you have historically used the Bob's Burgers movie as your perennial, this is what I'm looking forward to. So it has now been released. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, Bob's Burgers movie, by the way, is fun. We have it in our collection. You should borrow it. It's a really fun movie. But mine this year is another movie, and I saw the trailer for it the other day, and when I first read that they were making this, I was just like, I rolled my eyes. I was just like, oh God, like, did you guys not learn anything from the last movie? So I am cautiously optimistic about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which is scheduled to come out in June. I hated, in all caps, hated Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. To this day, Cheryl and I will say that there's only 3 Indiana Jones movies. If somebody tries to say, oh, no, there's 4, I'm like, no, Last Crusade was the last one that came out. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. But this one looks, I think they're going to kind of redeem themselves from that debacle of the Crystal Skulls. Trailer looks amazing. We get some really cool shots of like almost like a younger Indiana Jones. They did some great special effects with kind of like de-aging Harrison Ford. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think that's going to be such a fun movie.
I think you're right. And I think, Harrison Ford definitely seems happiest when he's playing Indiana Jones.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us, both of you. Like I said, this is always my favorite episode of the year, and I always love getting everybody's picks, and it's always fun reflecting back on the year. Nancy, is there anything coming up at EPL or Milner that you think people should check out?
Absolutely. So I know that winter can be hard for people. It's dark, it's depressing. And so I want to give a shout out because several of our branches are partnering with the Family Center, have been partnering for a while, to do drop-in single session counseling. So this is aimed at adults, and you can come and meet with a licensed counselor for 50 minutes and really get help, support, get pointed in the right direction for further resources. So, if you want to sit down and talk to someone one-on-one, could be on a variety of issues, check it out. You can find it online. It's called the Drop-In Single Session Counseling.
And Indy, is there anything you'd like to mention?
Sure. Well, you can find me singing and dancing with children all around the city right now because I'm part of a special pilot project where we are increasing our number of Sing, Sign, Laugh, and Learn classes. So be sure to attend those. Well, for kids 3 and under, ideally, but those are happening all around. And then with the literacy van, we are just taking library programming all around the city in places where you might not expect it. So if getting to a branch is sometimes a hindrance from you from attending our programs, you can still look it up on epl.ca and look at what's on. And we might be in places that are not just those branches. So you can come and visit us, whether it's playing with robots or learning sign language. I'll be around somewhere. And then if you just want to hear me overanalyze movies some more, you can listen to my podcast called I Love This, You Should Too, which I co-host with my wife, Samantha.
I mentioned it before, great podcast. And yeah, if you're a fan of Overdue Finds and you're listening right now, I think you'll really love Indy's show too.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure that you're subscribed so that you get all of our new episodes. And you can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Even more importantly, please tell a friend about the show. Make it your New Year's resolution to spread the word.
Yeah, and don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes, including a link to our blog where myself, Caroline, and so many other guests from this past year shared their picks for some of their favorite titles that you can borrow at EPL. And as always, we love to hear from our listeners. So you can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca or email us at podcast@epl.ca and let us know what some of your favorite movies or books were this year. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.